Simon was becoming increasingly anxious. His 12-year-old mind raced. His foster parents had locked him in this room for the past 3 days, only letting him out to do chores and barely feeding him. Sitting on the bed, he strained his ears for the sounds of footsteps in the hall, dreading their approach. Yesterday, his foster father had beaten him for accidentally dropping a plate, and the bruises still stung. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and Allison, the youngest of the Wrights' daughters, spoke softly through the wood. "Simon, don't say anything, but I'm unlocking the door. Mom and Dad are out. Hurry, get out of here." With that, Simon heard the lock click open, and Allison stood there, holding a full rucksack. Without a word, she handed it to him and pointed toward the stairs, silently urging him to leave. Without hesitation, Simon grabbed the bag and ran. As he reached the yard, he glanced back and saw Allison and her older sister, Karen, standing on the doorstep. They smiled and waved, encouraging him to hurry. Simon threw the rucksack over his shoulder and jogged down the street. At the corner, he quickly ducked into a hedge to avoid being seen by Mr. and Mrs. Wright, just managing to evade them. He kept moving until he was out of town. He walked throughout the day, the sky dimming as evening fell. His stomach growled, and he rummaged through the pack to find a stash of candy. He ate as he walked, searching for somewhere to sleep. Even after just one day on the road, he looked grimy, his clothes covered in dust. Exhausted, he stumbled through fields until he found an empty barn. Inside, he set down his pack and looked around for a corner to rest. He made a makeshift bed from old straw and settled in for the night. The next morning, Simon woke disoriented for a moment. He felt filthy and decided to wash himself in a trough. Afterward, he opened the rucksack to change. To his surprise, it was filled with girls' clothing, panties, padded bras, t-shirts, blouses, and jeans. On top of the clothes was a pair of walking boots and socks, which he realized would fit. For a moment, he was taken aback, but then he sighed, silently thanking Allison and Karen. This was their way of making sure he wouldn't be without a change of clothes. With some effort, he put on one of the bras, a t-shirt, and a pair of jeans with lace on the pockets. As he looked at his reflection in the water, he decided he looked cute. The only issue was his short hair. He packed the rucksack again, leaving his boys' clothes behind in the barn, and laced up the boots. The sun was rising, warming the air as he set off. As he walked, a few drivers offered him rides, but he was cautious. Some seemed to be looking for trouble, while others appeared genuinely concerned about a young girl walking alone. As the day went on, he saw the skyline of the city in the distance, and he knew he would reach it by dusk the next day. He slowed his pace, considering his options and how he would survive. He looked around for somewhere to sleep but had no luck that night. Ultimately, he decided to sleep in the woods under the trees. The night was cold, and as he lay there listening to the sounds of nature, he felt a sense of calm. His body still ached from the beating the previous day, and he suspected one of his ribs might be broken. He was careful not to move too much, propping himself up against a tree and dozing off fitfully. By morning, Simon was already on his way to the city, walking slowly to conserve his energy. He knew that life on the streets awaited him, but that didn't faze him. His years in social care had taught him to be self-reliant and to take life one step at a time. He thought about his appearance and knew that the way he was dressed would help keep him unnoticed by the authorities. As night began to fall, Simon reached the outskirts of the city and found himself standing in front of a mall. He needed to clean up and change, so he made his way inside and headed for the restrooms. After a brief moment of hesitation, he decided to use the women's bathroom, considering his appearance. He carefully pushed the door open, checked to make sure it was empty, and slipped into a stall, pulling the rucksack in after him. As he undressed, he examined his body, sighing as he noted the bruises and marks. He knew now that his chances of ever finishing high school were slim. His future would likely be spent on the streets. He used the facilities, cleaned himself up, and changed into fresh clothes, including a training bra. Looking in the mirror, he realized he looked like a 12-year-old girl. Simon walked into the mall and lost himself in the crowd, subtly joining a group of young girls shopping together. He observed them, silently noting how they acted, taking mental notes on how to pass himself off as a girl. He was a natural mimic, staying just behind the group, watching how they moved and spoke. It felt surprisingly natural, and he began to relax, scanning the area for someone who might drop $1 or $2 so he could eat something more than candy. One of the girls in the group turned and noticed Simon. She smiled, intrigued by the unfamiliar face. "Hey, are you hungry?" she asked. "Yeah, but my mom didn't give me any money. She just wanted me out of the way," Simon replied, his voice sounding like a young girl's. "Well, girl, we've got you covered. Burgers are on us, okay?" "Okay. I'm Scarlett," Simon introduced himself, mentally committing to the name as they led him to a burger place. The girls grabbed a bunch of burgers and fries and piled a tray for Simon, pulling him toward a table. They chatted and giggled, and Simon found himself enjoying the interaction, the pain in his chest a reminder of his recent troubles. He downplayed it to the group, telling them it was just an accident. The girls accepted his explanation and continued chatting for about an hour, until they had to leave as Jackie's mom was picking them up. Simon, now thinking of himself as Scarlett, watched them go, then gathered up the uneaten fries and burgers, packing them in a paper bag to eat later. Meanwhile, Angelica woke up at the Haven, feeling fully rested. She wondered why Daisy, her adopted daughter, wasn't up and shouting for her as usual. Dressed in a robe, she walked into the nursery and found Rose changing Daisy, who was giggling happily. Rose was tickling the toddler, who seemed to be enjoying herself, freshly bathed and full of energy. "Good morning, Mama. Are you still sleepy?" Daisy asked. "No, honey, I'm wide awake now," Angelica replied, joining in the tickling with Rose. Rose, smiling at the happy scene, then went through the wardrobe to pick out an outfit for Daisy. She chose a white party dress with a lace hem and a Peter Pan collar, adding a pair of white rumba panties with little pink rosebuds on the frills, white ankle socks, and Mary Jane shoes. Once dressed, the three of them headed downstairs to have breakfast. Daisy sat in a high chair, enjoying a few pieces of cut-up toast. Daisy was adjusting well to her new life. It had been about 3 months since the Haven had transformed Richard into the cute toddler now named Daisy. She loved her new family, and the days were filled with care and play. She went to daycare at the mall where Angelica worked, taking care of other children. Her best friend Kitty came along, and the two always had their favorite toys, Daisy with her rag doll, Jemima, and Kitty with Freddy Bear. A knock on the door interrupted their morning, and Mary and Kitty walked into the kitchen. Mary settled her daughter into a chair to wait for breakfast and poured herself a cup of coffee. Kitty smiled at her little friend sitting in her high chair, happy that she was growing up and now eating at the table like a big girl. Kitty was proud that she also used the potty now, no longer needing diapers, and wore panties instead. She liked her little friend and thought she would make an adorable baby sister. Mary watched her daughter's thoughts unfold with amusement, and then glanced over at Daisy, who smiled at her and held out her arms for a hug. "Hi, Auntie Mary, can I have a hug?" Daisy asked. "Of course, sweetie," Auntie Mary always has a hug for Daisy. As the clock ticked on, Angelica got ready for work. She dressed Daisy in a set of pink overalls and a pink t-shirt, buckled both children into their seats in the back of the station wagon, and drove toward the mall. She parked in the staff lot, helped the girls out of the car, and carried Daisy on her hip. As she looked around, her eyes landed on a teenager sitting on a bench with a rucksack. She must be going to camp, Angelica thought. The girl waved and smiled at her, and Angelica returned the smile before checking the clock above the door. She realized she only had a few minutes to get to the daycare. She made her way there, setting Daisy down in the play area with Kitty and setting up for the day. After giving the girls some juice and hanging the diaper bag on its hook, she looked up and saw the teenager standing by the door, watching the children closely. Scarlett had chosen to sit in the staff lot early in the morning, thinking it would be quiet before the mall opened. As she sat there, a station wagon pulled into a space next to the door. A woman quickly got out and opened the rear doors, helping a girl around 4 years old out of the car before lifting a toddler onto her hip. She then grabbed a cute diaper bag. The woman looked around, and when her gaze fell on Scarlett, she smiled. Scarlett smiled back and waved. After letting the woman head through the staff door, Scarlett followed her out of curiosity. He was interested to know where she worked, and the woman didn't seem to be a cleaner. She appeared more like a babysitter, with a warm, open face that made Scarlett think she might offer him more than just water. He followed closely until the woman opened the door to a unit labeled Play Pastures. It dawned on him that the woman worked at the mall's daycare, possibly even owned it. The 2 little girls she was with looked so cute, and Scarlett wondered if they were both her daughters. He stood at the door, watching them through the window. Angelica handed the drinks to the girls and walked toward the door. She noticed the teenager and saw signs that she had been living rough. The clothes didn't look like they had been worn for too long, but Angelica's eyes caught sight of bruises that seemed a few days old. "Hi. Can I help? Are you lost?" Angelica asked. "No, ma'am. I was wondering if I could have a drink, please?" Scarlett replied. "Of course. Would you like a cup of tea?" Could I have coffee instead?" "You look a little young for that." "I'm Angelica Hughes, by the way." "Scarlett, ma'am." "Okay, Scarlett, come on in and watch the kids while I get the tea ready." "Thank you, ma'am." Scarlett entered and sat on a stool, glancing over at the play area. The 2 girls were drinking, the youngest from a bottle. The older girl pointed at a set of blocks on a shelf, and the toddler nodded. Scarlett realized they wanted him to get the blocks down for them. He obliged, then sat back down on the stool and pushed his rucksack out of the way, waiting for his drink. Angelica returned with a smile, noticing that Scarlett had gotten the blocks down for the kids. She knew Daisy loved playing with the blocks and always asked for them after finishing her bottle of juice. The teenager seemed comfortable with the children, though her posture was a bit masculine, with her legs splayed. Angelica raised an eyebrow at the way Scarlett was sitting. Realizing his mistake, Scarlett quickly closed his legs and thanked Angelica as he sipped the tea. The warmth spread through him, and he leaned back against the counter, letting the comforting heat flow through his hands. Daisy looked at the big girl, who was sipping the tea Mommy had made for her, and she could tell she was relaxed. The big girl seemed like she was hiding from someone, and Daisy wondered who she was trying to escape. "Is girl hidin' from bad men's?" Daisy asked. Scarlett did a double take, glancing down at the toddler. He smiled and paused, considering how to answer. Daisy's question became more insistent, her gaze focused on him. Scarlett felt trapped and briefly wondered if Angelica would call the authorities. He hoped she wouldn't. He didn't want to return to the rights and face another beating. Angelica heard her daughter ask the teenager if she was running away from bad men. She waited for an answer, but none came. She debated calling mall security and getting this girl into foster care, but then she considered that the girl might be a runaway from social services, and sending her back could be a mistake. Angelica thought it over for a moment, remembering what Magus had said about helping others. As she reached for the phone, she noticed the young teenager tense up, reaching for her rucksack. She stopped, frowning, and decided she couldn't think about it any longer, especially as mall staff began arriving with their preschool children. Angelica was busy since she had no staff yet, but Scarlett saw the need and started to help out with the kids, even assisting with diaper changes after being shown the ropes. Scarlett was enjoying himself as he helped look after the children in the creche. Shoppers were also bringing in their kids, and soon the unit was full of children playing and having fun. Among them, the little one, Daisy, Angelica's daughter, seemed to rule her tiny kingdom. When some kids were being mean, Daisy would toddle over to them, place her hands on her hips, and scold them. Scarlett couldn't help but admire her. Daisy was always more concerned about the other kids than herself. After lunch, Daisy curled up in a corner and fell asleep. Scarlett gently picked her up and placed her in a playpen, out of the way. Angelica noticed the teenager picking up Daisy and settling her safely in the playpen. As Scarlett checked Daisy's diaper without disturbing her, Angelica thought deeply. The crowd of children was thinning out, with shoppers picking up their kids. By 3 o'clock, only Angelica, Scarlett, Kitty, and Daisy remained. Angelica pulled out $50 and handed it to Scarlett. "What's this for, ma'am?" Scarlett asked, taking the money. "A day's pay for a day's work, you earned it." "Thank you." "Scarlett, where are you living?" "Here and there, ma'am." Daisy, who had woken up and overheard the conversation, frowned. She liked the big girl and how she cared for the little ones without complaint. "Mama," she shouted to get their attention. "Yes, sweetie?" Angelica walked over to the playpen, thinking Daisy needed a diaper change. "Big girl stay with us?" "Honey, what would Grandma say if we didn't ask her first?" "And what about Scarlett's mom and dad? They might be waiting for her." Scarlett stood there, listening to their conversation, filled with uncertainty about what would happen if they found out he was a boy. He crouched down by the playpen, looking directly into Daisy's eyes. As he did, it felt as though he was falling into her gaze, and for a moment, he thought she could see right through him. He began to sweat, feeling lightheaded as the cuts on his arms burned. His last conscious thought was, "Oh no." Angelica and Daisy watched as Scarlett's body swayed, and then her eyes rolled back. She collapsed onto the floor in an untidy heap. Angelica quickly controlled the fall to prevent her head from hitting anything hard. Once Scarlett was on the floor, Daisy, who had managed to climb out of the playpen, stood next to Kitty, who looked like she was about to cry. Daisy hugged her friend, comforting her before walking over to her mom. She looked down at Scarlett's unconscious form on the floor and concentrated for a moment. "Mommy, why big girl go nap?" "I don't know, Daisy, I think she might be sick." "Like Daddy was?" "I don't think so. We should get someone to take care of her." "I know, Mommy. Bad mens, remember?" Angelica considered her daughter's words and remembered the bruises and cuts on the teenager's body. She checked one arm and saw a deep, angry red cut that seemed infected. Realizing the extent of the injuries, she quickly decided to take action. She hurriedly buckled the two young girls into the station wagon, threw the diaper bag and rucksack into the trunk, and sprinted back to get the teenager. By the time she returned, Mark Robson, one of the mall's security guards, was standing next to Scarlett. "Miss Hughes, is there a problem?" "Oh, thank God, Mark. That's Scarlett, my new summer assistant. She fainted, and I was going to get her back to her parents." "Let me help, Mississippi. I can carry her, or I can get a wheelchair from First Aid, or would you like an EMT to check on her?" "It's okay, Mark. Her mom's a doctor, but the poor kid just needed to get out of the house. She's a neighbor of ours, and I said she could help. Could you carry her to my car?" Mark didn't respond but radioed his control room to lock down the unit as Miss Hughes had an emergency to attend to. The control room confirmed the lockdown, and Mark carefully lifted Scarlett into his arms, stepping out of the unit as a shutter rolled down behind them. He grunted at the weight and carried her gently toward the staff lot. Some late shoppers watched as they made their way through the mall and out to the staff exits. Outside, a female security officer was leaning against Angelica's car, keeping the two girls entertained. Mark nodded to the officer, who opened the passenger door for him, and he carefully placed Scarlett in the seat. Angelica thanked the officers and quickly ran around to the driver's side, starting the car as Daisy and Kitty waved at the officers from the back seat. As Angelica drove, she considered that Rose, who used to be a nurse, could take care of the teenager. They had the space at the Haven, and she knew they could handle the authorities with the resources they had. The thought of the infected cut on Scarlett's arm made Angelica grit her teeth in frustration. She wasn't paying attention to the road and had to slam on the brakes to avoid crashing into the back of a truck. She cursed under her breath, and from the back seat came a giggle from the two girls. Looking in the rearview mirror, she saw Kitty tickling Daisy. "Sorry, Auntie Rose, I was cranky." The trip to the Haven seemed to take forever, but with Angelica's fast driving, it felt like only minutes. As she spun into the driveway, throwing gravel up behind her, the front door of the house opened, and Rose stood there, looking surprised at how quickly Angelica had arrived. The car came to a screeching halt, and Angelica jumped out and dashed to the passenger side. During the drive, some of Scarlett's clothes had become stained with blood, and Angelica panicked. Without waiting for an explanation, Rose immediately lifted the teenager in her arms and carried her inside. Angelica got the girls out of the car and drove over to Mary's to drop off Kitty with her mother. She briefly considered leaving Daisy with Mary but quickly realized that it would be a mistake. After dropping off Kitty, she headed back over the field to the Haven, Daisy in her arms. As they walked into the kitchen, they saw Rose had already managed to wake the teenager and was trying to remove her blood-stained t-shirt. Scarlett was weak, gently resisting as Rose worked to take off her clothes. As the t-shirt came off, Rose gasped when she noticed the bulge in Scarlett's underwear. Daisy giggled, breaking the tension as the two women processed the shock. Angelica looked at Scarlett's face and thought that it definitely looked like a girl's face, though the package in the panties suggested otherwise. She wondered if Scarlett had been trying to pass as a girl. "What's your real name, Scarlett?" "Scarlett?" Rose was shocked. "That's the name he gave me back at the mall," Scarlett said softly. "I'm sorry for lying, ma'am, but I couldn't use my real name." "I'm Simon Jacks," the teenager mumbled. Simon went on to explain a little about himself as Rose worked on the cuts. He winced as she touched what he thought was a broken rib. Rose's hands were steady as she cleaned the infected cuts with iodine. Daisy watched closely, her head tilted as she listened intently. She began chewing on a strand of her hair, and Simon gently reached forward to remove it. "Daisy, don't chew your hair. Do you want a pacifier?" he asked the toddler. She nodded and Simon asked Angelica where Daisy's pacifiers were. Angelica went and got one for her daughter and was surprised at how caring this young boy was. He was like how Richard used to be. Simon, again dressed as Scarlett after he had got cleaned up in a hot bath and apologized to the women. The two women told him it was not a problem, and they settled down in the lounge with Daisy sat on the sofa with Simon. The adults spent the evening talking to Simon as Daisy started to fall asleep, cuddled up against him. As Daisy faked sleep, she was trying to reach Gabriel with her mind. Slowly there came a gentle touch with a soft mental light as the magic user touched minds with her. In Daisy's mind, she talked to the woman and explained what Simon had outlined as his past. She showed Gabriel images of Simon at the daycare center. Helping out, Gabriel replied with a set of images of Simon's past in care and his fostering. She showed Simon in the children's home playing with a group of girls. He was about 5, they were having a tea party. Then it jumped and Simon was being bullied by a larger boy. No words came, but Daisy could imagine what was being said. The images jumped again and Simon was cowering under blows from a man whose face was filled with hate. The man then started to use a belt on the boy. By the looks of things, this was what had caused the boy to run away, and Daisy tried her hardest not to let tears flow. Daisy opened her eyes and looked up at the boy. He could see the pain in her eyes and he wondered if his lie had hurt her. He hugged the toddler and made to apologize, but the child gently placed a hand on the boy's cheek. Angelica and Rose saw what Daisy was doing and they looked at each other, eyebrows raised. The toddler's hand seemed to be glowing as it touched the cheek, and both women heard what seemed to be a chant coming from the toddler. They watched in amazement as the boy's hair became longer until it brushed his shoulders. Then the glow from Daisy's hand seemed to spread over Simon's body and the boy stood up. The glow became stronger and a familiar laugh filled the room. And Magus stood there, his beard bouncing as he laughed. It was not an evil laugh, but one filled with mirth at the world. Simon was feeling strange. He had a compulsion to remove his clothes. which he did till he stood there in just the panties. His skin felt warm, but not the warmth of the fever, but a gentle warmth like the sun on a spring day. His nose picked up the scent of spring flowers and it itched, his inner thigh itched also, and he looked down. As he looked down, his chest seemed to thrust outward slightly, and he appeared to starting to grow chests. He leaned forward to stare at his panties, and the bulge was shifting. Then suddenly he screamed. The pain was intense, and his inner thigh seemed to be like a hot fluid, and the pain moved up into his hips. He felt things moving around and was beginning to feel faint again. Then the pain faded, and he looked at his arms and noticed all the bruises had gone and looked as though they were never there in the first place. He put a hand down to the front of his panties and did not feel the usual bulge. He slipped the hand into the panties and found a slit there. It was smooth. He slipped a finger into it to explore it, and he started to groan at the sensations coursing through his body. "Oh my God, I've got a cutie." The women watched the slow transformation, then looked at the toddler. Sat on the sofa, she was smiling widely. Angelica was shaking, and Rose was hugging the arms of her chair. Both women sat their faces white. Daisy hopped off the sofa, the action made clumsy by the fact she was still in diapers. She hugged the new girl and started to giggle loudly. Simon looked at his body, and he was shocked. He was still shaking at his reaction to putting his finger into his new cunny. "You Scarlet Faux EBA now," Daisy told him / her. The transformed boy stood there, a look of shock on his face. He stopped and realized that it was the truth. He was now a she. He considered and found himself comfortable with the thought, as if finally he was complete, and he stood back inside his head. He made a mental inventory of his pack, and he realized that there was no dresses in it, and he felt cheated. The women looked at the new girl and burst out laughing as they recognized the look. "I have nothing to wear," Scarlet complained. "Don't worry, sweetie. We'll take you shopping tomorrow, we promise." Rose led the girl to a bedroom, and she concentrated, and the room transformed to one suitable for their new charge. Scarlet stood transfixed as she looked around. The room was decorated as if it was for a princess. There were stuffed toys everywhere, dolls, a bookcase, a desk with a computer, a dresser, and pictures of Scarlet sat astride a pony. The girl looked out and saw the pony grazing in the paddock outside her window. She knew the pony was called Star, and he was hers. There were rosettes from pony shows and awards for ballet framed on the walls. She thought, and the exercises for ballet filled her mind. She was a bit annoyed that her chests were smaller than her best friend Jackie's. She stopped for a second and stopped the flow of her thoughts. "Hold on, I'm a boy," she exclaimed. "I think not, Daisy has decided," Rose replied. "What is she, a damn witch?" As the words left the lips, the girl found herself over the woman's knee. She squirmed as the jeans were pulled down, exposing the girl's panties. "Do not use that sort of language in this house, young lady." As Rose spoke, she raised her hand and whack! Scarlet's bottom was getting warmed by a good old-fashioned spanking. This continued for about 2 minutes. To the girl it seemed like an eternity as she bucked and writhed on the knee of the woman. "Grandma, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," Scarlet sobbed. "Is your baby sister a witch, young lady?" "No, Grandma, I love Daisy. I'm sorry I was a brat 'cause she wanted to ride Star." "Don't spank me no more, please. She can ride Star, I promise." The girl looked up at her grandmother, tears rolling down her face. It seemed her mind was split. One side she was Scarlet, and the other she was a boy called Simon who had been beaten. Scarlett thought to herself that maybe she was nuts. She was Scarlett, older sister to Daisy and Angelica's daughter from another man. She was 8, but this boy Simon was 12. She remembered Richard, Daisy's dad, being so ill and her helping mom to look after him and Daisy. Then Richard died and they moved in with Grandma Rose and Mom. Bought the creche at the mall from Richards's insurance payout. She enjoyed helping there when she was not at school, and also she had enjoyed helping Richard with the special kids. All through this, the other persona was screaming that she was him and these things never happened. That he had been changed by Daisy's magic into her and he wanted his body back. The screams from Simon became weaker as Scarlett took over completely. She was stood looking at her grandmother rubbing her bottom and sniffing. It did not really hurt, it was just this was the first ever time that either Grandma or Mom had spanked her. She hugged her grandmother and pulling her jeans up headed downstairs back to the lounge. As she walked through the door she looked at her baby sister and crouched down. The little one had been crying and Scarlett thought she knew the reason why. She hugged the toddler tight. "Sis, if we stay with Grandma tomorrow, do you want to ride Star?" "Please." Daisy jumped into Scarlett's arms to give the older girl a hug. "After Grandma takes both of you shopping, ladies," Angelica warned the pair. "Yes, Mama," the pair chorused, smiling. The following morning Angelica woke the girls with a shout and laughed as her youngest daughter stood at the bars of the crib jumping up and down. Daisy was obviously excited at the prospect of going shopping with her new older sister. Scarlett wandered into the nursery rubbing the sleep from her eyes. She was wearing a pink nightshirt with a kitten on the front. She joined in the laughter as she looked at her baby sister. She helped her mom dress Daisy and took the toddler down stairs for breakfast. Rose was sat in the kitchen talking with someone over the phone.